got a lot of interest from very big companies. Some of the national labs, the Army and the Navy are getting involved right now. It's looking like that's going to go faster than we expected.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening. This is Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm Nate Benson, Digital Media Manager at 43 North and the host of this podcast. This week's episode is brought to you by KeyBank. We want to thank KeyBank so much for their support of not only 43 North, but the startup ecosystem in general. This week on the podcast, we have Jenae Pitts, co-founder of OneTen Capital. OneTen Capital is a hardware-based venture firm based in Buffalo, New York, and Jenae is actually from Boulder, Colorado, which is seeing its own resurgence of a startup ecosystem. But she came to Western New York several years ago, decided to stay and start her own venture firm. But Jenae tells her story a lot better than I do, so let's not waste another minute with me, and let's get right into this week's episode. Jenae, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Nate?
Good. All right. As we always start out on the podcast, give me the quick pitch of who you are, what OneTen Capital is.
So OneTen Capital is a new venture capital company here in Buffalo, and we focus on hardware engineering startups in the late seed stage.
Okay.
So just about to start getting customers and just about to make their big jump to commercialization.
And who are you?
I'm Jenae Pitts. And I'm from Colorado, just new to Buffalo, but I love being here and glad I made the choice.
What brought you from, because I know Colorado has a booming kind of tech startup scene as well, especially in Boulder. What brought you across the Rockies, across the Mississippi to all of us here in Western New York?
Well, I just graduated from the Simon Business School and loved Rochester, but while I was at school, started working at Vader Systems up here in Buffalo, and got to know the community up here and thought I would stay.
So far, so good?
So far, so good.
So, you graduated. Why did you start OneTen Capital?
My business partner, Jonathan Amoya, and I see a need here in Buffalo to activate some of the capital that we know is here. There are players here that we think would love to be on the field and could make a big impact, but maybe don't know how to do that, don't know what it looks like to be an angel investor. And we're hoping is to put some structure around that to help activate like I said, that capital. I think back to the first time that I got involved, that I invested in a startup. There's a lot of murkiness around what should I be looking at? What should I be considering? And I was fortunate. Typically what you do is look to some smart person to tell you, this is a deal to look at, this is something to get involved in. And then if you make it through the legal paperwork, off you go. But after that, you don't hear much about what's going on with the company. I was lucky enough to be involved with a company that was transparent, communicated well, communicated a lot, and reached out when there were challenges. That often doesn't happen. And so with our businesses that we're working with, Vader being one of them, we'll bridge that gap between before the investment, looking at the deep due diligence side, and then after investment, keeping you informed so that you can, as an investor, be engaged and have something to talk about in the community and be an ambassador for that startup.
Now, was that first, kind of walk me through the experience of making your first investment. Was that prior to kind of starting OneTen in Vader?
Yeah, it was. I was in business school and got connected to, it's called Gilson Snowboards out of Pennsylvania, connected to Nick Gilson out there, and I spent the good part of a year getting to know the company, getting to know the founders, and before I finally thought this might be something. And they're doing well. Like I said, they've been great through the process, which takes a lot of energy when you're a founder. And so you can also see why other startups don't take the time to keep their investors involved. But so I spent about a year getting to know them, checking out. I went and visited. I tried the product, all the things that you do in due diligence.
Luckily, with a snowboard company in the East Coast, there's plenty of mountains where you can go try that out, right?
Right, exactly. They actually have a carpeted mountain at their farm where they put soap and water. Not that that's the ideal place to
At least they can test
snowboard.
in the warm months of July and August.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you don't always have that luxury of time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have that access to the company. And when time is critical for those startups, somebody like OneTen getting in there and looking at all of those things that you would be concerned about, seeing where the holes are, seeing what might sneak up around the corner, and then just giving that to you right from the jump is valuable. So that's what we're looking to do. And in the case of Vader Systems, I've been with them for a year, working and helping on the business and marketing side of things, but we also have the advantage of, as I said, knowing what might be coming, knowing where our weak spots are, and making a plan for it.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think is it important to you to have that relationship with a company or a startup you're going to invest in? You know, being able to spend that time getting to know them, because a lot of VCs don't necessarily take that approach. They have a couple quick meetings and then just jump right in or jump out.
Exactly, that is important to us, and a lot of VCs will say that they bring good access to capital and advisory help for the startups, and I think often that doesn't amount to much more than a couple calls and, hey, think about this, good idea. But when you really want somebody to be there taking arrows with you, they're not around.
Yeah.
And so having a close relationship with the companies we work with is critical, but also what we see as being what's going to help us help them be a success.
Why did you decide that, and kind of walk me through that decision of deciding that hardware was going to be kind of a sector of industry you guys were going to focus on, especially here in Western New York?
There's a lot the biggest piece is there's a lot going on in this area in terms of a legacy of manufacturing. Great companies, big companies that have overcome the hurdles of engineering and process improvement and machine tool building that we think could help accelerate these startups if they got involved. If it's not from an investment standpoint, just from a, hey, we've been here, we've already paid the tuition to learn how to do this, let us just tell you and get you there. For example, there's a lot of really great science minds here who know the answer to some of the questions that companies like Vader are asking, and if we can just help stir that up, it'll both increase their chances of success but speed it up.
So tell us a little bit about Vader. You started with them about a year and a half ago. When I was at Channel 2, I did a story with them. You were there in their basement. It's really kind of a true kind of startup story. Started in a basement and kind of worked their way up to where they are now, right?
Yeah. They've been a pleasure to work with. Like you said, they were in their basement, moved into came above ground and moved into a space in August. And we started helping them with their fundraising back in about April. Okay. And since we started helping them with that and took that off their plate, they've made exceptional progress in their technology. And so that's part of the magic.
For those unfamiliar, explain what Vader does.
Sure. Vader Systems is a liquid metal 3D printing technology company. They have the current process for printing in 3D with metal involves using a powder that's spherical, proprietary, very expensive powder that also happens to be explosive. So it's difficult to work with.
Which is what you want, really, when you're... You want explosive powder lying around. When you're
imagine
going
to that every day. Yeah. Whereas Vader's process uses welding wire, commodity grade input, so it's less expensive. Their process is very fast. They have a high degree of control, over where the droplets of molten aluminum are placed, and it's safer to work with. So the other fun thing is it's not bound by gravity, so you can imagine applications like in space and on boats where they could be 3D printing parts, repair parts, instead of carrying inventory. So there's a lot of applications where this can go, but the first couple that they're focusing on are printing highly conductive traces for electronics. And we've seen really good results with that in the last couple of weeks. And they've made a lot of progress, like I said, with their printing parts.
I can see a huge interest. In fact, I'm probably going to start this company myself, a 3D printing yacht company, where you can just print out on Lake Erie and call it a day.
That would be awesome.
It's the best of both worlds to me, 3D printing and yachting. No, I don't know anything about yachting.
You should.
I know. When I met with those guys, this was a very early prototype, and it kind of just looked like, what spare parts did we have floating around, and let's see if this works. They've now have a very refined, encased machine that I know several of the big aerospace and computing companies have been looking into. Correct?
Yeah. They've got a lot of interest from very big companies. Some of the national labs, the Army and the Navy are getting involved right now, and so it's just a matter of they sold their first machine to the Rochester Institute of Technology, where Dr. Cormier is. He's one of the leading experts on 3D printing, and now it's a matter of getting the technology from academia and the experimental side of things to your customers who need a solution that's a little bit further along, but it's looking like that's going to go faster than we expected.
Which, from a VC standpoint, you love when you hear things like Navy, Army, right? That means Absolutely. Your investment's doing well.
Absolutely. The interesting piece of that is the Department of Defense can't buy the powder technology because for obvious reasons, you can't have explosive powder in the battlefield. Yeah. And they can't buy things that are not American made. So Vader's a perfect fit for that.
And they're just based out of a warehouse now in East Amherst, correct?
Yeah, they're up in Cross Point Parkway.
That's great. So what are you looking towards now in terms of the hardware space here? Either are you looking to invest in Buffalo area startups, or are you looking to expand as well? OneTen, that is. Because
we get so involved with the companies we work with, and it involves weekly visits on site, we're staying in this area. We think there's enough here. We might look outside towards Pennsylvania, and because there's a lot of great stuff going on down toward Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and even in Toronto. So we're going to stay pretty close.
Kind of the corridor of Toronto, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. It's a nice little oblong rectangle.
Yeah,
so to speak.
Rectangle.
How's the experience been? Because the VC world, there's a lot of VCs, a lot of VC dollars now going around. Being a startup yourselves, what's the experience like, kind of going through the paces of being a startup, trying to invest in other startups?
It's been interesting, actually, because it takes a lot of energy to work on our business while we're working on other people's businesses. But the experience has been great. The community has been great, and I think now what we need to focus on as a group of venture capital parties is more collaboration in terms of understanding what stage and what type of company each of us is looking at, how we can pass one to the next. And it's going to be that kind of structure that helps us attract money from the outside. While we do believe that there is money here, like I said, that just needs to be activated, it's going to take external investment too. And for that to happen, we need to have a little more organization. And so we're going to be looking to build collaborative partnerships with the other people here in town. There's a lot of great stuff going on in the VC space, in private equity, and we're going to need to all be pulling together.
I'm certainly not an expert in finance. That's why I do podcasts for a living. But compared to 5 years ago, the VC dollars coming into Buffalo, Western New York, was quite minimal. Now it's kind of leaps and bounds. That's changed. Is that a correct perception of what's happening locally?
Yeah, I think that is true. And something that we have going on here is there's not a shortage of deals. In a lot of cities, you see a lot of money and not enough deals, like out west, or a lot of deals and not enough money, which I've heard that argument about this region. But I think there are enough great deals. There is money here, and in terms of compared to 5 years ago, there's definitely a lot more activity. Something we're seeing is investment going toward things that are a little bit safer, like real estate, and actually in this town, conservative and more deals that look like real estate that are more of a sure thing. We see a lot of that. So getting some of the money over toward the venture side is something we're focused on, but we'll take building confidence that we'll take good care of your money. We're going to work with these asset companies to because the goal is great returns and success for these companies, and the idea would be to have them turn into cornerstone companies like your Moogs and your Eastmans here in town. So I guess as a community, a lot of the money is still feels a little more conservative than what you see in other communities.
From the startup side of things, I've got some hardware. I'm ready to start pitching. What should be the first approach to OneTen Capital? What would you be looking for in a hardware startup?
We look for companies that have a product and it's either close to being finished with the technology ready to go to customers, or you have a line of sight to how that's going to happen. A big thing that I see startups forget to do or underestimate is customer validation, actually asking people if they would buy it, what they would pay for it, what their thoughts are. Go out there and really pound the pavement and see, does anybody want this? And you have to get away from how much you love your idea and ask the hard questions and see if there's something out there. If you come to us with real customer interest and good research and at least 80% say of a real product, then we're interested.
Well, I think I have some more work to do then for some of the things I've got going. I'm not there yet.
We'll help you with your yacht company.
It's a good idea. So kind of wrapping things up. What's next for OneTen Capital? Are you guys active? I guess it's a loaded question because VCs are always looking for the next big investment. But how close do you think you guys are to further investments? I know you announced big raise with Vader this past spring. What's next on the horizon for you guys?
We are we're probably going to announce in the next month our next company we'll be working with. We have another one in the pipeline we're really excited about, and so keep your eye out for those. I think by the end of this year we'll launch and close those first 3 deals and really focus on those, and then look to add probably 2 more next year.
So this time next year, hopefully a portfolio of 5 or so, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will check in with you again down the road next year.
Sounds great.
And we'll get a status update of OneTen Capital and what you guys are up to.
Thank you, Nate.
Talk to you soon. I want to thank Jenae for joining us this week on the podcast. If you want to learn more about OneTen Capital, you can visit their website, OneTenCapital.com. Remember to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more people who leave a review, the more people who find out about this podcast, and then we have more listeners. And I think the more people who learn about the Buffalo startup ecosystem, the better off we'll all be. You can listen to this podcast on Podbean, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and of course Apple Podcasts. We release episodes every week, and we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. Trust me on that. We've got some great episodes coming up. In fact, when we announce the finalists of this year's 43 North competition, we will have many podcasts with those finalists. So it's going to be pretty cool. And if you haven't done so already, please leave a review of this podcast on iTunes. You can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and Podbean. And we release an episode every Friday, sometime in the morning, sometime depending on my workload, it's in the afternoon. But we try to get an episode out every Friday, and so far we haven't missed one. Thank you so much for listening. For 43 North, I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one.